Hello again and welcome to Superhuman Customs. I'm Stephen Human. I'm very excited for this week because we have something big. I was at a convention a couple weeks ago and I was able to get these two guys in a 2-pack for $20. That's a freaking steal. Normally I'd never found these guys for less than 50 bucks. So I got them, obviously. Now, next week I'm gonna work on this Superman. I'm kind of deciding what to do with him. I think I'm gonna do something a little bit more simple. So we'll get to him next week. Right now though, we're talking about Devastator, and we are going to turn Devastator into a legit Doomsday. I don't care about Devastator as a character. I have no comics with him. He's the, I don't know, evil version of Batman if Batman were Superman in the dark multiverse. No idea. But this is a great sculpt for a Doomsday. Now, a lot of people have complained because Doomsday is usually bigger than Superman by, you know, they make him really huge now, generally in the comics and in the toys. But if you look at the original comics, he's actually not that much bigger than Superman. So this could work. It's like a lot of characters like Bane and stuff like that, Darkseid, where they've been drawn in so many different scales that different scales work. So I'm gonna make this guy work. We're gonna use some totally different techniques that I haven't used before. My brother, who's always sending me good stuff, he sent me some clay specifically to be used for action figures. So we're gonna play around with that. We're gonna have a ton of fun and we're gonna turn this guy into Doomsday. So let's hit the road. First things first, I don't like how in this mouth it's just a little bit kind of darker. So what I've done is I've mixed a little bit of my go-to paints, the Model Air Red and the standard Craft Black, and I mixed them together into a slightly darker red. Now I am planning on getting some Vallejos because the longer that I do this, the more I kind of see the difference in the quality of the paint. And I want to be able to, see, look at that. That's what I want. Maybe it's a little bit too black, but so I'm slowly getting to where I want to get Vallejos because they just work better than the others. So there we go. Let's go ahead and close it up. And you can see that you can't see any on his neck or anything. That's what I wanted. It's a simple little change, but for me, it's a must. Now my brother sent me this. This is some sculpting clay. It's air dry. I have never used anything this before. He also sent me a bunch of tools to experiment with. I mean, all of this is experimentation, and this guy is going to be our guinea pig. I don't know how this is going to turn out, how it's going to work with the plastic, any of that stuff. I'm planning on having to glue it in place. I really don't know, but let's go ahead and start playing around. All right, so I just pulled off a little bit of this clay, and I'm just going to kind of start to fold it. What I'm going to do first is the spikes on his chest. So I'm going to pull off some little pieces and just kind of roll them and see if I can get them into little points, and then start putting them together. So I've taken some and I'm just putting it on his chest, and then I'm going to take some of these little spikes and see how this works. I don't want too many big spikes. Like that's probably too big. That spike right there. This is all experimentation. I have no idea what it is I'm doing. So I opened up some of these tools and I'm going to cut these into smaller pieces. That looks pretty good. Because I want them smaller. I don't want them gigantic. So I'm going to pull them all off. Again, I don't know how this is going to dry. Like, is it going to dry and look plasticky? Is it going to dry and look like clay? I don't know. I'm going to paint it to be gray like these before I do any kind of wash on it. So hopefully it will match in some way. All right, let's go ahead and cut off these bat ears with this X-Acto knife. Because I don't want them on. He's not Batman. He's Doomsday. So just going to kind of get the X-Acto knife in here. Now it would probably be easier if I heated him up a little bit. I don't really want to right now. So I'm just going to cut in and get these off. And you're going to put, some pressure on there obviously, but it's not too bad. And I'm almost through on this one already. And there we go. But now I'm just going to take this. I'm just going to shove it in here. Right into the clay. Now he's got more spikes. Boom. Simple. Right, I've made one for the arm here, and I'm just kind of mushing it in here. So because I only want like one more right there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of super glue on here, just to make sure that it stays and then it dries, and then I can kind of shape it the way that I want. So I'm gonna do that with both sides, so we can just have a couple more spikes over here, bigger ones. Right now I'm just taking the tool and I'm just adding a little bit of texture in here. I'm not making these guys to sell, I want these guys to be in my collection. And so, you know, I want them to look in the way that I would like them to look. All right, since this is all about experimentation, I just had an idea. So these are from an Overwatch figure, just an extra that is in my extras drawer. We all have extras drawers, right? Where you throw all the extra crap. I'm gonna cut these, and before the clay dries, I'm gonna shove them in so I can actually have spikes on his shoulders that are rubbery. So let's try it. See if it'll work. You gotta have to dig it down so that it's got kind of a hole to go in. And then I'm gonna glue it. But let's see what we get here. So far, he's looking pretty good. So this is dried over the last few hours. It's nice and hard. Everything feels very secure. I obviously don't want to push it too hard because I don't want him to pop off. Now, I had a couple of different ideas on how to do this, like maybe using hot glue because it's more rubbery. When you're adding anything to a character like this, the possibility of it falling off is real. So I just added a little bit of super glue once I kind of got it into place. And so all of this is pretty sturdy on there. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna gray it up. I'm gonna use some gray paint so that it matches these spikes before I start putting on the wash. And I am not going to do anything down here on the legs because he had bigger spikes. That is just gonna fall off. Remember, I want these to still be toys and posable and be able to move and all of that. And if I add bigger ones here, that's just not gonna be possible. So I'm cool with this. He's looking great. I've jagged up some of these sections on his head a little bit. So let's continue. Obviously, this guy already has the gray. We wanna start with a darker color, and this gray will match pretty perfectly. And so everything will look correct. They'll look the same once I put on the wash. I think this clay's turned out pretty good. Like the points are really sharp and they're hard. Like I was afraid they would be brittle, and they're not brittle, which is great. Check this guy out. I've added a few more spikes throughout. Everything is looking really good. I'm very happy. Let's go ahead and move into the dry wash. Let's start whitening up these bone spurs on his chest, everything, and make this guy into Doomsday. And then I can go in here. See, look at how nice that looks. That's what I'm going for. I think I'll do a little bit less paint than I did here on these other spikes, because I really want the gray to kind of stand out. I have just been so excited about this guy ever since I saw him for such a good price, and I thought, you know, I could make my own Doomsday. But just remember that this is a comic accurate scale. He doesn't have to be, 12 feet tall to be Doomsday. The original drawings were about this scale, which is great. Looking so good. I'm gonna do a wash on him now, just to add an extra layer and put some textures on to keep this guy looking great. Gonna use some of this new game wash from Vallejo on this guy and make him look awesome. And just like with everything else, I'm gonna make sure that I try and spread it around, because I don't want it too black. Ooh, that's going on darker than I wanted. So that's going on a little bit darker than I had wanted. So I might need to put just a little bit. I'm gonna move it around like how I do with everything else. So he turned out just in general to be a little bit darker than I want. So I'm gonna go through and just do a real dry brush on these and just add some accents to lighten up these bones, because the bones ended up looking very much like the skin color, and so they don't stand out, and I want them to stand out. See, that's looking okay. That's looking pretty good. He is looking awesome. I am so happy with how these bone spikes have turned out with the different layers. Now, what we're gonna move on to, I think I'm pretty much done with this. It's looking great. We need to now start painting here in his clothes, right? And it's green, so what I was planning on doing was buying a new paint. But then I realized that I still had this green, and it's a very bright, neon green, but I also figured I could put a wash over the top of it and darken it up a little bit, and then I wouldn't have to buy a new paint. Plus, while this paint has been a pain in the butt, it doesn't come off of my brushes. It's ruined some brushes because it only comes off basically in alcohol. And even then, it's a pain. But it works really well with the softer plastic. So what I've done is I've grabbed a couple of really crappy brushes just from my daughter's paint sets. And that's what I'm gonna use, just to give coverage and then to get some of the detail stuff. So let's go ahead and dive in and give this a try. Start with the big brush. Just start throwing it on there. This is all about coverage at this point. We'll use the smaller one for some of the detail stuff, but right now I just want to get this around as much stuff as humanly possible. And I'm going to want to be careful because this is a this is a very permanent paint, and so I don't want it getting on his skin at all. So I'm going to try and stick here to the center areas and not go too far astray. All right, with the smaller brush, we can get into some of this where I was too afraid, I was too nervous to get in with the big boy. Because now I have a little bit more control. So let's move in here. I still want to be nice and careful about everything. I don't want to go too crazy. Yes, very bright green. He looks like a surfer Doomsday, but we're going to wash that down so it's dark. Let's go ahead and move on to these smaller areas and knock those out. I am just loving this Doomsday. I'm not going to lie. To have a McFarlane Doomsday is awesome, and obviously with a custom, it's always a little bit more special. I'm trying to keep the paint fairly thick on here because the thicker that the paint is, the more it naturally gets around the edges and helps to fill it in without me hitting the skin. So remember, you always want to have the paint lead your movement so that the brush isn't necessarily touching the edges, the paint is touching the edges. And that will allow you to get better coverage without touching the skin. Now, you're always going to touch the skin, you're always going to have a little bit of spillover, and that's okay, particularly here because it's nice and tattered, like I've noticed in some of the places where I've kind of messed up. It doesn't look too bad, but I'll take some gray and I'll patch some of that stuff up so that it comes through a little bit more, naturally. I just want it to look natural, that's all. Let's go ahead and start with our customary wash. Let's go ahead and just move it all around, and this will darken everything up the way that we want it to be dark, because yes, this green is too bright. It's too bright of a green. As we always do with a wash, let's just make sure that we get it all over the place and we keep it moving so it doesn't pool up. So I've decided to darken it up a little bit more with some of this brown wash and see if it makes it just a little bit more of the green color that we want. So let's go ahead and experiment. And it has changed the color just enough that it looks a little bit more like how you would expect Doomsday to look. I personally like the brighter color. I think it looks great as a contrast, but this brown Vallejo game wash really has changed that color just enough. Looks great. These Vallejo washes are so nice. I mean, what I've noticed particularly with this Doomsday is that they haven't beat it up like the Newell oil that I was using. It goes on much more smoothly and subtly. I am so happy with how this guy turned out. Oh my gosh. This is better than I think I had in my mind of how this guy was gonna look. The spikes turned out amazing using the little plastic fire things and the clay. The wash turned out great. I mean, everything about this guy screams Doomsday. I am absolutely in love. If McFarlane puts out, a bigger version, I might think about getting it, but for now, this is my quintessential Doomsday. He's maybe a little bit on the small side, but again, if you look at the comics, he's accurate to those original drawings. This guy is awesome. Remember, subscribe, posting new content every week. I hope you guys are enjoying it. I'm Stephen Human. We'll see you next time.